Hi, I'm Caden, here with my brother,
Cal,
and you're watching Eating W's.
eat the W.
That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
On today's episode of Eating W's, we have episode 2 of our 4-episode series of predicting the placement of each and every of the 32 NFL teams for the 2024 NFL season. Not much came out of the Hall of Fame game last week, nor this whole last week of camps and training camps. So not really much news to talk about. One big thing is this week is the first official week of the preseason week 1. All 32 games will be playing a preseason game this week. Packers and Vikings both play at 3 and 3:25. Vikings at 3, Packers at 3:25 on Saturday. Most of the games are on Saturdays, but we have a couple of games on Thursday, Friday, and Sunday as well. So make sure to start tuning into those games. I think most of them are actually just landlocked or area locked, however you want to say
Regional
it.
broadcast.
Regional, but
except
then
for NFL Network.
yep,
Replays them.
a good number of them on NFL Network as well. So if you have that, good way to watch them. But if not, you're really not missing too much. I mean, preseason's fun because it's the start of football, but at the end of the day, it's preseason for a reason. But you get to see some guys make some dreams come true, so that's pretty awesome. But with all that out of the way, we will roll straight into episode 2 and the North divisions this time around. Just like last time, we'll go from AFC 4-1 and then the NFC North 4-1. And of course, NFC North being the big one and one of my favorites to pick from this whole episode. But let's get started with another one of my favorites to pick from this whole series, which is none other than the AFC North. Absolute bloodbath this year. Lots of really good teams, lots of high expectations. And starting at number 4, the lowest expectations out of the group, we of course have none other than the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, I really like what the Pittsburgh Steelers did this offseason. They go and pick up Russell Wilson and trade for Justin Fields. Justin Fields is a nice pickup because it's a guy who has a lot of upside, really looked like he was starting to click on a little bit last season, and they got him for absolute nothing. It is all reward and such little risk. They signed Russell Wilson to a good amount of money, which kind of surprised me more than anything, but it's too good of a division. Callan can vouch for it. I tried to push him up the board. I really believe in Justin Fields. He's had a really good camp so far, which camp doesn't really mean anything. You got to do it in the preseason. And then in the preseason, that really doesn't mean much either. You got to do it in the regular season. So until we get to that regular season, until we see who they name the starter, how Justin Fields is doing in camp does not really matter at all. But even with that being said, he's looked really good. I've heard good reports. I've seen some amazing throws and good chemistry with him and George Pickens when he gets to run with those ones and different drills and things like that. So I think that the Steelers are actually going to be much better than people are giving them credit for this year. But I got to keep them at 4 here just because this is such a good division from top to bottom.
Yeah, this was really a tough division to pick, but I think that the Pittsburgh kind of belongs at 4 here when you look at how the rest of the division stacks up. I think this is going to be Mike Tomlin's first ever losing season for the Steelers. I'm not as high on Justin Fields. I didn't like what I saw when he played for the Bears, and I don't know how that's going to be much different for the Steelers. Whether that they roll with Fields or Russell Wilson, neither one really had that great of a season last couple of seasons. So it's going to be, I think, tough sledding for the Steelers no matter who they go with at quarterback. And Najee Harris is coming in off on his contract here where he could be a free agent next year and be one of the top free agent running backs on the market. So he'll be playing for his contract, whether that's with the Steelers or with someone else next year. And what's really going to be the strength of the Steelers is again going to be that defense, and specifically that pass defense with Joey Porter Jr. leading the way. He was their big pickup last year at the end of the second or beginning of the second round. And I think that because of that, they'll win quite a few games. I don't know if they're going to quite get to that 8-9 mark or 9-8 where Tomlin gets another winning season. I think this will be his first losing season, and I think they'll be his first last place in the division also for this year.
I'm happy that you brought that up because that's a big X factor there for the Steelers is Mike Tomlin is a really good coach and that coaching staff in general. I mean, you don't have that many winning seasons just by luck and getting carried, and he has a lot of them. So big X factor there. Moving on to number 3 in this division, we have none other than the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, of course, like we just said, 4 was a little more defined, but 3 through 1 in this division just could really go anywhere. I mean, if you look at these teams, they are all really good and they all have really big shortcomings at the same time. I mean, it's not like these are 3 just perfect teams. They're just so evenly balanced in being really damn good teams, but having a few of these glaring holes. The Cincinnati Bengals glaring holes, really sadly more than anything, are injuries. They really struggle with it every year. Joe Burrow, especially being in and out, he did have one full season and they went to the Super Bowl. So that shows how good he can be when he's healthy and playing at his highest level. But when he's hurt a lot and he's coming off of a big injury last year that could still linger in, I think, on his throwing hand, that's a really big X factor there. You don't know what's going to happen. That defense always leaves a little bit to be wanting, but that offense is just so good that they can usually pull them out and keep them ahead in those close games. So a lot can be said about the Cincinnati Bengals on a good side of things, but I just think that there's a lot of things that could go wrong, and even more just luck than anything could go in a bad luck leading way for them. So I have them here at 3.
Yeah, this was really tough to put the Bengals at 3 here because you got Joe Burrow, a Super Bowl quarterback, coming back off of his wrist injury, and that did factor into the placement here because I think that wrist injury is going to affect him long term more than people really know. And another big X factor here is how well are the wide receivers going to perform, because both T. Higgins and Jamar Chase are looking for new contracts. And even though T. Higgins did sign his franchise tag, which is only a 1-year deal, he's looking for the big money long-term contract next year, whether that comes from Cincinnati or somewhere else. I know he'd like it to be in Cincinnati, and so would the Bengals, but you can't pay them all, especially when you got Jamar Chase waiting in the wings to get one of his big deals. And is he going to get more than Jefferson? That's going to be interesting to see, is who gets more money, Jefferson or Chase, because you're looking at probably 1 and 2 in the wide receiver market, number 1 and number 2 overall for the best in the NFL. But when it comes down to it, the one reason I've had the Bengals in 3rd here is because they are going to lack the running game. Yes, they lost Joe Mixon and replaced him with Zach Moss. And Zach Moss has not been a primary number 1 guy. And I can't think of who their other running back is. I want to say it's Chris Evans.
I believe so.
They got that running back out of Michigan. Not
Blake Corum. No,
not
Blake
Corum,
Corum.
the one the year before. But I think that they're going to have a really weak running game. And I think because of that, they're going to rely too much on the passing game, and they're going to force it downfield. And I expect the Bengals to maybe have a bit of a letdown kind of season instead of maybe one of their more higher win seasons. And I expect them to be 3rd place, could be right where they belong when it comes down to it at the end of the season.
Yeah. Chase Brown is their other running back. He is out of Illinois. I knew it was a Big Ten school, but I knew it wasn't Michigan. Chase Brown out of Illinois. They picked him up last year. But yeah, and then another kind of thing that I forgot to mention is no more Tyler Boyd, which I know he wasn't a huge part of that offense on the field, but sometimes when you lose a veteran presence like that in a receiver room, it just shakes things up a little bit. It's not such an obvious, like, groundbreaking effect, but just sometimes, especially when you have 2 relatively younger receivers like T. Higgins and Jamar Chase as your number 1 and 2, sometimes you kind of need that older guy there. So we'll see how that affects him.
And he was the most reliable of all 3.
Oh, 100%.
So they're going to lose that reliability.
Least injury prone as well. Yep. So now, moving to at number 2, and of course, just like we talked about last week, once you see number 2, you know who number 1 is, but we'll get to number 1 in a second here. For now, the spotlight is on number 2 and the Baltimore Ravens. Now, this is where Cal and I butted heads a little bit. I think that the Ravens should have been number 1. I definitely see the reasons, and Callan did talk me into it with putting the Browns number 1, as you, of course, will see in a little bit. But the Ravens are just such an overall good team, and I think they're one of the most consistent teams when it comes to coaching with Harbaugh and that staff, when it comes to just least injury prone. They have some injuries, but not a ton. When it comes to just week in and week out performance, I think they are far and away the most consistent. At the end of the day, especially with that extra game on this season, after 18 weeks, I think the most consistent teams win the title, or wins the division title rather, after it's all said and done. So that's why I wanted to put them up front here at number 1. But I think that the Browns do have a lot of upside, so Callan did kind of talk me down on them a little bit. But overall, I really do think the Baltimore Ravens will be a good team this year, and I think they are a shoo-in for a wild card spot if they don't win the division.
And I actually agree or disagree completely. I look for the Ravens to have a down season this year. I think Derrick Henry, even though he was just released by the Titans, I think there's a reason he was released by the Titans. And I think that he's hit his ceiling. I think that he's going to kind of max out and kind of the bottom's going to kind of fall out on him. And I think he's not going to have as great of a season as he usually has. He'll have a good season still, just because he's the only running back in Baltimore I can think of right now. So he'll get his carries, but I think that he's going to have a down season, and people are going to key in on Lamar Jackson, who has already missed quite a bit of practice due to illnesses and other injuries already in training camp. And I think that's going to be a big thing, is keeping Lamar healthy. And even if he's not healthy, if he's out there less than 100%, I don't think he's nearly as effective as he is when he's 100%. And you can say that about a lot of guys, but him in particular, I think injuries really affect his dynamic playmaking ability. And because of that, I see the Ravens having a down season. I actually wanted to put them in 4th when we started this. I think they're going to be the biggest surprise in terms of bottom falling out letdown of the season. We'll have to see. Between them and the Seahawks, my AFC and NFC team, least valuable teams right here.
Your biggest losers?
My biggest losers in the AFC and NFC, the Seahawks and the Ravens. And you know about my disdain with the Seahawks. The Ravens is kind of new here. I just don't see them having that dynamic of a season. I don't know why. I can't put my finger on it exactly. I just get this feeling that they're going to have, because people expect them to have such a great season, because they finally get Derrick Henry, who they've been trying to get at the trade deadline for the past 2 years. I think it's going to be all that glitters is not gold. And they're going to get him, and they're going to find out that, wow, he has a lot of tread on those tires, and they're going to end up blowing somewhere.
Yeah, there's definitely, with guys like Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, huge injury concerns. Mm-hmm. But if they can both stay healthy and stay at least near that 100%, it's just the ultimate thunder and lightning. You got the lightning in the bottle with Lamar Jackson, his speed, and then the rumbling thunder with Derrick Henry and his strength. So lots to look out for there. But of course, the ultimate caveat, can they stay healthy? So of course, moving on to number 1, you already know who it is. I'll put them right side up since they're number 1. You got the Cleveland Browns, kind of the shocker here so far throughout this, and probably one of the bigger shockers in general, in my opinion. But the big point that Callan made that talked me up on this one is, if you look at their season last year, maybe it's a fluke. Of course it could be a fluke. But they lose Deshaun Watson and Nick Chubb so earlier in the season, and you make the playoffs and win a playoff game with, or did they beat the Texans? Are they the ones, right? Or did the Texans smoke them? It's one way or the other. That game was a blowout, but I'm totally flipped on who it was.
It was.
When you're talking, I'll look it up.
The Browns beat them, I'm pretty sure.
I think the Browns smoked the Texans, because it was like the Texans, man, they were not ready. So yeah, I think it was the Browns smoked the Texans, but I'll check that in a second. So even if, let's say they did lose it, let's say they got smoked in the playoffs, you make a playoff run with Joe Flacco literally off the couch and no Nick Chubb, who is your offense pretty much going into the year, and an aging offensive line. There is something there. There's something special. I don't know if it's in that defense. I don't know if it's in that receiving core, and specifically Amari Cooper, who had one of his better seasons ever, which is pretty impressive considering what he did with the Cowboys before going to the Browns. That's just something special. And of course it could be a fluke. It could be 2017 Vikings level fluke. But nonetheless, you gotta give them the respect, and you gotta at least think that they can maybe do it again. So that was kind of what allowed my brain to push the Browns past the Ravens in this one. But
yeah, I agree with it. I had the Browns first right from the get-go, and I had to talk you into it, into moving the Ravens down. But like you said, with Nick Chubb coming back, I think that's going to be a huge, huge thing. And if he's able to stay healthy all season, I expect the Browns to do very well this season. And you got Deshaun Watson coming back at quarterback, and you know he'll perform better than Joe Flacco. I mean, all he's got to do is perform to the level of Joe Flacco, and that's off the couch Joe Flacco. We're not even talking about Super Bowl run Joe Flacco. So you don't have much that you really have to play in terms of quarterback to really get this team going. And the biggest X factor here is on that defense, and that is Myles Garrett, the reigning defensive player of the year. And he is the reigning defensive player of the year for a reason. And that's because he is one of the best, if not the best, defensive edge rusher in the game right now. Especially now that Aaron Donald has retired, I would have to say Garrett is probably the most fearful defensive player in the NFL now.
Yeah, that man is not human. It's crazy what he can do.
Mm-hmm.
Just a quick fact check. We were flipped. The Texans destroyed the Browns. But like I said, nonetheless, them making the playoffs at all, even pretending like to be near the playoffs was a miracle. So to make it and get beat by one of the better teams in the league right now, yeah, just absolute insanity. So that is our predictions for the AFC North and a little bit of a shocker. So now we're going to move down to a even more fun division. And in my opinion, maybe you can argue the NFC South over here, but I truly think this is the most up for grabs division in the league right now. So many young players, so many question marks, so much ambiguity in this division of just who's going to do what, who's going to step up, who's going to step down, that it's going to be such a fun division to watch. And why not get it started with one of the biggest question mark teams there right now? Not the Minnesota Vikings, but of course the Chicago Bears, staying where they kind of have been, where it seems like they belong for the past couple of years there in fourth place. Now they are looking up right now. I'll give it to them. Number 1 overall quarterback, one of the higher prospect quarterbacks, I should say, in a long time. They pick up that receiving core by getting a young guy like Rome Odunze and a really experienced veteran who's still doing well, like Keenan Allen. You still have DJ Moore. You pick up DeAndre Swift, and you still have Khalil Herbert in the background there. Their defense kind of stays the same. I can't think of any huge defensive players off the top of my head, but I'm sure I'm missing one or two. And Kevin Byard joined them in the offseason.
Kevin Byard joined the safety room. Yeah.
But just overall, I think this is a roster that is getting future ready right now. I think in a couple of years they could be really good, really competitive. But right now it's just really young. Keenan Allen is still not in his prime by any means, but he's still on the edge of his prime and a great veteran presence. But, you know, as receivers get older every year, you never know when the floor is going to kind of fall out from them. So in a division filled with question marks, they just have way too many of those question marks for me to put them any higher than 4 right now. But I think by this time next season, we're maybe talking about a Houston Texans level jump up where all of a sudden it's like, wow, this team could be really good. Not as good as the Houston Texans, but a Houston Texans-esque jump.
Yeah, I could see it. It all depends on how well Caleb Williams really does perform in the NFL. I'm not 100% sold on him yet. I have to see some games first. He did well at USC, but there were some flaws there that I didn't like. When he got down, it seems like he just let teams beat him up. You know, unless he was ahead and winning the game, it seemed like he wasn't having fun. So we'll see how that transpires in the NFL because I feel like he's going to be losing some games.
You're going to get down on that.
It's going to be, you know, and these aren't going to be blowout games for the Bears. More than likely, they're not going to be like at USC when they were winning games 48-20 or something like that. They're going to be tough games for the Bears to win. And it's going to really show Caleb Williams' character is how well he responds to that controversy and that conflict when that comes up. And the Bears are in actual game-winning drive situations, how well he performs. Now, I do like the receiving room. It is very talented with Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, and Rome Odunze. You got past, present, and future there. And you got the evolution of the wide receiver market. And I think that that's going to be the main offensive driving force for the Bears this year. Now, I wanted to put the Bears at 3. I think the Vikings are going to be 4th because I don't think Sam Darnold's going to do so hot. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. As far as the Bears go, I do think they will win more games than they did last year, but I still don't think it's enough to get them to get to really challenge in this division quite yet. Maybe next year, maybe 2 years, but it all comes down to really how Caleb Williams performs.
Yeah, I agree. I refuse to let the Vikings go at 4. But I just said earlier this episode, I think that the most consistent teams are the ones who win their divisions. So it makes sense that the lesser 2 consistent teams are 4 and 3. So now we find the Minnesota Vikings slotting here right at 3. Now, of course, the Vikings fan in me, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to talk about how much upside they have. Will any of that upside to come to fruition? No, probably not. Minnesota loves to hold this upside in and just really let it build for years and years, but never really let it show. Unless you got a guy like Case Keenum jumping back to that 2017 fluke season, then, let all the upside show. But here we are. We have a rookie quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. I want to say the highest we've ever selected a quarterback, so a lot of hype sitting there. But so far in camp, Sam Darnold has been stepping out more than anybody. I mean, J.J. McCarthy's looked good, but I've been watching a lot of the camp. And Sam Darnold, and specifically his connection with Justin Jefferson, which anyone can have a good connection with a talented receiver like Justin Jefferson, but specifically his connection with Justin Jefferson has been really solid. So that throws a total wrench in things. You want to talk about ambiguity? Here you are. I mean, who's your starting quarterback this year? Sam Darnold comes in thinking maybe he's going to start 2 or 3 games. If he has this good of a camp, can translate it into the preseason, can translate it into getting the starting job week 1 and actually rolling with things, who knows how long he's going to be the starter. And then now you have a guy sitting there waiting in the wings like J.J. McCarthy, who might be just as talented himself.
Yeah.
What are you going to see there? And then we get another year under the Brian Flores-led defense, which I love any defense led by Brian Flores. So I think that only goes up this year. You lose Danielle Hunter, but you pick up 3 different very talented edge rushers in Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, and Dallas Turner out of the first round of the draft. There's just so much upside on this team. And like I said, Vikings' favorite thing to do is waste upside. But when all that upside is there, you got to imagine that something hits eventually. Maybe J.J. McCarthy, maybe Sam Darnold is where all that upside has been building up to. But for now, can't get too far ahead of yourself. They're number 3.
Yeah, I think 3 is a good spot for them here. They're a young team, really led by this defense where the veteran presence is on the defensive side of the field. So they're going to be, I think, a defensive stalwart of a team. Maybe, more like the Bears of old where they're led by the defense and the running game. I don't know if the passing game is going to be as efficient this year, whether it's through Darnold or J.J. McCarthy, just because Darnold hasn't done anything to really, prove that he's anything, outstanding. And McCarthy, not yet. And McCarthy coming in as a rookie, he won a lot of games, which is good, but he didn't have superstar numbers at Michigan either. So it'll be interesting to see which quarterback they go with and how well they perform. The defense is going to be the key to how many games they win and how well that defense performs. And you're talking about, like you said, the edge rushers coming off the edge and putting pressure on the quarterback. That's what the Vikings want to do. And I think if they're able to do that, they're definitely going to win some games. I don't know how many they'll win or if they'll win a lot, but I definitely see them winning some. They got some lower tier opponents that they can beat up on. So
that's where we thrive. No, actually, those are the games we lose.
Yeah.
We usually win like the 49ers. And,
that's right. You guys beat the 49ers.
Yeah.
I always forget that.
We were one of like 3 teams to do it, but we lost to the Chargers with a hurt Herbert, so.
But another key is going to be this Vikings running game and how well it really is revived with Aaron Jones back there running the show now, and with Ty Chandler being being there to spell him when needed. But as far as Aaron Jones being your bell cow, the only concern I have about that is that he is very injury prone. And I know that's kind of been the word of the episode is injury prone. But He is definitely another one of those guys that are injury prone. He didn't have a full season last season, and the Packers only wanted to pay him for half that season, and they had to let him go. So that's how he ended up in Minnesota. They wanted to pay him the full contract that he wanted, and I think that he will have some good games, but I predict him to get hurt, and you're going to have to rely on Ty Chandler for a few of those games.
Yeah, I could definitely see something like that happening. I think I want this more than I think it's going to happen, but always keep an eye on Kene Nwangu as well there at that running back
The kick
3.
returner.
He is, of course, more known for his kick return skills, which he might be able to really show with the new dynamic kickoff this year.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to kind of see what we do with him in the run game. I mean, Ty Chandler looked really good towards the end of last season, but hasn't really proved himself. Aaron Jones is coming from a division rival, new team, injury prone. I say give Kene at least a few carries a game and see if he can get any sort of momentum going and really learn how to be a running back instead of just a kick returner. But we'll see if that actually happens.
And one other thing is, how much does Jordan Addison play? Because now he might get to play this season and his suspension might not kick in till next season because he has court, I want to say, in October for his OWI or DUI, whatever you want to call it. But
thank you, legal system.
So he may get to play this season, but next season he'll get the wheel of suspension.
And that could be 2 games or that could be the death penalty given by the NFL. You really never know.
Just take him out to the guillotine.
Take him out to the big blue and red NFL branded guillotine right in Roger Goodell's backyard. That's where they go. Yeah. Okay, moving on to number 2 and technically number 1 in the NFC North. Since the Vikings didn't go 4th, couldn't go 1, I couldn't allow the Packers to go 1 either. So at number 2, we have the Green Bay Packers. And like I said, I'll repeat myself one more time. I think the most consistent teams win the divisions. And I think both in the AFC and NFC North, there's a lot of inconsistency, a lot of injury risk. And the Packers showed a lot of inconsistency last year, not week to week. A lot of times when you hear inconsistency, you think good week, bad week, roller coaster seasons. The Packers showed one of the first times I'd ever seen pure symmetrical inconsistency where Jordan Love comes in for his first season at quarterback and plays 8 of the lesser games. Maybe not quite 8, maybe more like 6, but 6 to 8 horrific games. Like I want to say they were all double interception games. It looked like the Packers were so far out of it. They were finally absolutely terrible. And then he comes out in that last half, maybe a little more than half of the season, and has one of the better seasons of a guy in his first year starting ever. Just absolutely kills it those last 8 games. But I will be the first to argue it. I told Count a lot last year. He had a lot of luck in his game. He had a lot of Brett Favre-esque luck in his game where he was tossing those balls up to the middle of the field and they were getting brought down by these no-name receivers in like triple coverage. And it was fun to watch as a Packers fan, I'm sure. But luck runs out eventually, and I don't know how long it's going to go. Now he gets all this money. That's a lot of added pressure. That's a lot of added ego all of a sudden. You're not playing for anything anymore because you already got the bag. You already got all those guaranteed millions. So just a lot of change happening in Jordan Love this year. A lot of expectations coming with this year that he didn't have last year. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that kind of plays on him. Not even physically this season, but how he plays different mentally this season. And that's why I just can't put them at 1, even though they did play like the best team last year.
Yeah, and the one thing that convinced me on not putting them as 1 is that the Lions are going to be a very tough divisional opponent. But as far as the Packers go, I expect them to win a lot of games this year, whether that's in 2nd or 1st. And I expect them to do that because really this contract that Jordan Love just got says you better win a lot of games this year. With that amount of money that he's being paid, that's what that translates to, is win a lot of games and at least get to the playoffs. And then maybe we'll see how it goes from there. But I expect this team to do really well. This is again going to be the youngest team in the NFL with an average age of 24 and a half years. And they actually got younger than last year. Last year they were the youngest team at 25 years old. This year they're 24. they actually lose some age and lose some veteran presence like Aaron Jones and David Bakhtiari and bring in younger guys like Josh Jacobs and Andre Dillard to help replace those guys that they lost. And then you also...
Did you get rid of Mercedes Lewis?
Yes.
Well, that brings your,
yes.
that brings
And
your
Mercedes
age average
Lewis
down
is
like
also
4
gone.
years right there.
So-
That guy was like 58, I think.
Yeah, he's on the Bears now. But so because this team is so young, and we talk about the NFL being a young man's game, I expect them to do very well this year. Jordan Love is a dark horse MVP candidate. I expect him to have career year numbers. I don't know if he can match anything from that 8-game stretch that he had, but if he can stretch it out to more consistent across the 17 games and not just maybe not the mega 8, but great 17, that sounds a lot better for the whole season and not as much stress for half the season. Because I was very worried there that Jordan Love wasn't the answer, especially early on. But I am one of the first to say that I was wrong. And I think that he is the answer. And we will see at the end of this contract if he really is. But as far as the Packers go, with this age of this team and the young dynamic playmakers like Josh Jacobs, Christian Watson, the great Bo Melton. I expect
Romeo Dobbs isn't even going to mention
Romeo Dobbs.
Bo Melton gets one and not Romeo Dobbs.
Romeo Dobbs has actually been cooking Jaire Alexander. I'm worried about Jaire Alexander. Romeo Dobbs has like 6 touchdowns on him in training camp so far. I don't know if I hope it's Dobbs, but Alexander might be on the down tail of his career.
He didn't look like he used to last year. I know he's dealing with some back spasms and back injuries, but even outside of the injuries, when they said he was 100%, he wasn't the lockdown corner that he used to be. He really wasn't.
Corners go fast. You're locked down for a couple years and then you just lose it.
It really does. I mean, the NFL receivers are just so good anymore that it's
they
so
get
hard
younger
to do
and younger.
But yeah, it's all I'm saying is the lower Jordan Love's expectations got, the better he played. So now when he's sitting here with $55 million on the line this year, lots of high expectations for someone who usually plays opposite of those expectations. But and then, of course, to finish this episode out, we have the Detroit Lions there at number 1 this year. We already kind of talked about why we have them over the Packers. The Lions are just such a good team, such an all-around team. I mean, you look at it and they don't really have a hole. Like, there's not something about the Lions where you're like, wow, they are just absolutely terrible right there. Even some of their lower position groups or lower coaching staffs or lower strengths and weaknesses, they're still like, yeah, they're not great there, but they're not terrible. Like, they're not one of the worst in the leagues at anything. And there's a couple of things that they're some of the best in the league at. So when you put that together, that's just hard to beat. And I mean, it comes down to, do you catch them on a bad week almost sometimes? And that can happen. And that's kind of how some people lose games, or some teams lose games and some worser teams win games. But overall, they're just a good team. It's hard to say anything else because it's weird to say, because for the past decade and since I've tracked football with any sort of seriousness, I don't know if I've ever said they're just a good team. But here we are this year, and they're probably one of the better teams in the league, and they're just a good team.
They are. The Lions are one of the more all-around, evenly matched teams when you look at special teams, offense, and defense. And the main thing that leads this offensive side of this ball is that offensive line, who's probably the best offensive line in the NFL, led by Frank Ragnow and Penei Sewell, who has just been one of the most dynamic left tackles you could have asked for to come out of the draft in 2022.
He is a 2022
2022.
No,
I want to say 22. But because of that, he has just been a stalwart at that left tackle spot since he got there, no matter what year it was. He was a stalwart in Oregon that whole time too. He was thought of as the number 1 overall talent that year in the draft. And he looks like it in the NFL, like he's dominating at that position. And because of that, led by that offensive line, I expect the Lions to do really well this year. Jared Goff is coming off a career year where he did better than even his Super Bowl season. He's looking to take that next step and really show that he can be that true cornerstone quarterback, leader of the team. I still don't buy it 100%, Jared Goff, but he's he's working on me. He's definitely considering looking at last year, he's definitely done better than I ever thought he could do again. So because of that, I think the Lions are going to be a really tough team to beat out on this division. I do expect the Packers to be first or second. But if they're not first, then I think it's the Lions that take this division, led by that strong running game by the two-headed monster of, I can't think of the running back.
Jameer Gibbs and David Montgomery.
Yep, Jameer Gibbs. I kept wanting to say Brian Robinson, but that's the one in Washington. But because of that running game and the way that not only Amon-Ra St. Brown plays, but I think Jamison Williams is going to have a breakout year, and he's going to show that he's going to be one of the top options for the Lions this year. And it's going to come down to how well he really is able to perform and be more consistent out in the wide receiver field and put away those inconsistencies and those drops.
Yeah, that'll be a big thing there if he can do that.
Mm-hmm.
I did look it up, but I did remember as I was typing, Penei Sewell's 2021.
21.
Because it was, who are the Bengals going to take, Chase or Sewell?
Oh, that's
that
right.
was the big debate.
That
So
was
I
right,
remembered
yeah.
halfway through that. But yeah, he came out a little rough because they moved him over from his natural position. They moved him to left tackle, but he's really grown into that role. And like you said, has just become dynamic was a great word for it because he's just so good. He's so strong, so quick. He can really do it all. And again, there we go back to it. Do it all. That's just really what the Lions do is do it all. So
they're an all around team. They're going to be tough out.
Those were our picks for the North divisions, the AFC and the NFC North. Let us know your guys' thoughts, what you think, what we could have done different, because these are two of the more toss-up directions, I should say, in the NFL. I mean, both the NFC and the AFC North are totally up for grabs with a lot of good teams right now.
And who would have thought if we had predicted the Browns and the Lions
last year
to be tops in their division? Not only just last year, but think about 4 years ago, if somebody had said the Lions and the Browns are going to be the tops in their division. It's
insane.
Just crazy. And then we'll talk about last week, the Patriots and Giants being last in their divisions. Just parity in NFL. It shows that it's real.
Just constant turnover. There really is. So make sure you stay tuned in until next week when we talk about the AFC and NFC South, which the NFC South is another very fun one, another huge toss-up division. So great episode coming next week. But until then, don't forget
to eat the W.